The phone rang just after 2 in the morning. I was half asleep when I saw my neighbor's name glowing on the screen. Lisa Harper. She had never called me at this hour before, not once in all the years I'd known her, so a tight knot of worry formed in my chest immediately. I answered without hesitation, my voice thick with sleep as I rubbed at my eyes and sat up on the couch. "Lisa, are you okay?" There was a pause on the line, just long enough to make my skin prickle. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, shaky and strained. "Rachel, whatever you do, don't look outside your window." The words didn't make sense at first. I blinked, confused, trying to wake my mind up. "What? Why?" I asked, my heart already starting to beat faster. "Just promise me," she said, her tone suddenly sharper, urgent in a way I'd never heard before. "Promise me you won't look outside." Before I could press her for an explanation, the call abruptly ended, the line went dead. The silence that followed felt thick and unnatural, like the house itself had frozen. I stared at my phone, waiting for it to ring again, but the screen stayed dark and lifeless. If this story already has you on edge, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's brave enough to keep listening. My name is Rachel Morris. I'm 32 years old and I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Oregon. I work long shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, and nights like this are usually when I finally get to breathe. Normally, it's just me, a warm mug of tea, and the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the windows. After 12 hours of alarms, voices, and constant motion, I crave silence. But that night, the quiet didn't feel soothing. It felt wrong, heavy, like something unseen was pressing in on me. Lisa wasn't just a neighbor. She was a constant presence in my life. She'd lived next door long before I ever moved in, and from day one, she treated me like family. She brought over baked goods, invited me in for coffee, and checked on me when my long-term relationship fell apart. She had this calm, watchful way about her, always reminding me to lock my doors or keep a light on at night. That's why her fear on the phone unsettled me so deeply. Lisa was cautious, yes, but she was never panicked. I glanced at the clock again, 2:07 a.m. The rain had picked up, drumming harder against the roof. The lamp in the living room flickered briefly, then steadied, casting long shadows across the walls. I tried calling her back, straight to voicemail. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe she'd seen an animal or heard a noise that spooked her. Still, the way she'd spoken didn't match a simple scare. I stood up, the blanket sliding from my shoulders, and padded quietly toward the front door. The house creaked softly under my steps. I peered out through the small glass pane. Everything looked normal. The street was empty, slick with rain, the streetlights glowing dimly through the mist. The Johnson's house across the road was dark and still. This neighborhood was the definition of safe. That was why I'd chosen it. I checked the front door lock, solid. Then I turned back toward the living room window, and Lisa's warning echoed in my head. "Don't look outside your window." I hesitated, my hand hovering in midair. My heart thumped harder now, a quiet, insistent rhythm. The request was so specific, so desperate, but curiosity has a way of drowning out caution. I reached for the curtain and pulled it aside. At first, I saw nothing unusual. The street looked just as it always did, calm and empty. I felt my breath start to slow, relief creeping in. Then I noticed it. A shape standing just beyond the reach of my porch light, half swallowed by shadow. A tall figure, completely still, facing my house. I froze, my fingers tightening around the curtain. I couldn't make out a face, no features at all, only the unmistakable sense that it was watching me. Rain shimmered across the yard, outlining the unmoving silhouette. My stomach twisted painfully. I let the curtain fall and stumbled backward, my pulse roaring in my ears. I grabbed my phone and called Lisa again. No answer. I sent her a shaky text. "Someone's outside my house. What's going on?" There was no response. I moved through the house, checking every lock. The front door was secure. When I reached the back sliding door, something made my chest tighten. It looked closed, but when I got closer, I saw the latch hadn't fully caught. Cold air slipped through a narrow gap. I pushed it shut and locked it, staring at my pale reflection in the glass. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. "Lock every door. Stay away from the windows. He's not alone." The words made my blood run cold. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Whatever was happening was real. I turned off the living room lights and crouched behind the couch, clutching my phone like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. Every sound outside seemed amplified. The wind, the rain, the ticking clock on the wall. I tried to calm myself, to think like I would during an emergency, but one thought wouldn't leave me alone. How did Lisa know all of this, and what did she mean, "he's not alone"? After what felt like an eternity, I forced myself to crawl across the floor to double-check the doors. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Wet grass crunching under slow, deliberate steps. Not wind, not an animal. I killed the kitchen light and peered through a thin gap in the curtain. 2 figures moved along the edge of my yard. One stopped and turned slightly, and I was sure it was looking straight at me. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Lisa. "Police are on their way. Stay quiet. Don't let them see you." Before I could respond, another message appeared. "Unknown number. I see you." My chest tightened as panic flooded through me. I looked back outside. One of the figures was gone. The other stood perfectly still. Then came a soft tapping on the glass. Gentle, polite. Tap, pause, tap. I dialed 911, whispering frantically as the operator answered. She told me help was coming, told me to move somewhere safer. I crept down the hall, every sound magnified, until I heard the back door handle rattle. They were testing it. I ran. I slammed my bedroom door shut and locked it, gasping for air. The dispatcher stayed with me as I listened to footsteps moving along the house, slow and methodical. Then everything went quiet, too quiet. I heard a creak inside the house. My hands shook as I grabbed the baseball bat near my dresser. Another vibration from my phone, another message from the unknown number. "You shouldn't have looked." I turned off the screen and backed into the corner, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Floorboards creaked somewhere beyond the door. Something scraped softly along the floor, and then a whisper slipped through the darkness, low and unmistakable. "Rachel." It wasn't Lisa's voice. I gripped the bat tighter and prayed the police would arrive before whoever was in my house reached that door. I stood in the far corner of my bedroom with my back pressed to the cold wall, clutching the baseball bat so tightly my fingers were numb. My heart pounded so loudly that it drowned out almost every other sound, but I could still hear faint footsteps in the hallway. Whoever was in my house was moving slowly, carefully, as if they knew exactly where I was hiding. The only thing separating me from them was a thin wooden door and a lock I'd turned in desperation. I glanced down at my phone. The line to the dispatcher had gone silent. The call had disconnected. I had no idea how long I'd been alone, without anyone on the other end. My hands were trembling as I tried to redial 911, but the signal was weak. I didn't dare turn the screen back on because the glow might give away my position. I couldn't stay like this. Every instinct inside me screamed that waiting would only make me a target. I needed to do something, anything to tip the balance back in my favor. My fear began to shift into a kind of sharp focus. If I stayed frozen, I was handing control over to whoever was in my house. If I moved, at least the choice would be mine. I crouched low and tried to think. My bedroom had one window that opened onto the side yard. It was small, but I could fit through it if I had to. The problem was that the footsteps were coming from that side of the house, which meant someone could be waiting outside. Still, staying here was worse. A quiet knock on the door made me flinch. 3 soft taps, then a voice, low and calm, that made my skin crawl. "Rachel," it said softly, "It's Lisa. Open the door, please." For a second, my heart leapt. Could it really be her? But no, the voice was wrong. It had the same pitch, but none of Lisa's warmth. It sounded like someone trying to copy her. Each word too deliberate, too slow. I steadied my breathing and didn't answer. "Come on," the voice coaxed again. "It's just me. You're safe now." I stayed silent, forcing my shaking hands to tighten on the bat. The footsteps shifted outside the door, then a scrape along the wood like someone dragging their fingernails down it. My phone buzzed once, startling me so badly I almost dropped it. A new text message from Lisa's number popped up on the dark screen. "Stay quiet. I'm still in my basement. They have my phone." The message was the proof I needed. The person outside wasn't her. They were trying to lure me out. I took a deep breath and made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to break the door down. I crawled to the window, careful not to make noise, and lifted the curtain just a crack. The yard outside was dark and wet from the rain, but I didn't see anyone immediately. I unlocked the window and pushed it up as quietly as I could. It squeaked and I froze, waiting for the sound of footsteps. None came. My heart hammered in my ears. I slid the bat out first, then swung one leg over the sill. The cold air hit my face, waking me up like a splash of water. I slipped out, landing on the damp grass below with a soft thud. My socks soaked instantly through, but I didn't care. I crouched low and grabbed the bat again. For a moment it seemed like I'd made it. The night air was still, the rain soft. Then I saw movement at the corner of the house, a tall silhouette stepping out from behind the bushes. I bolted, running toward Lisa's yard. My bare feet slipped on the grass, but I pushed harder, gripping the bat like a lifeline. Behind me, heavy footsteps pounded the ground. He was chasing me now, no more pretending. Lisa's basement door was just ahead. I remembered her text. "I'm still in my basement." She had to be down there. I sprinted across her yard and yanked at the handle. Locked. I pounded on it with my fists. "Lisa, it's Rachel. Open up." A muffled voice came from inside, weak but real this time. "Rachel, is that you?" "Yes, please open the door." A click. The door creaked open just enough for me to slip through. Lisa grabbed my arm and pulled me in, slamming the door shut behind us and locking it again. We stumbled back into the dim basement, gasping for breath. Lisa's face was pale, her hair messy, her hands shaking. She had a bruise forming on her cheek. "He took my phone," she whispered. "I called you before he found me. I thought you'd have time to hide." "He's outside," I said, clutching the bat. "He followed me here." Lisa's eyes darted to the small basement window. "The police are close. I called them from the neighbor's landline before I ran back down here." We both crouched low, listening. Above us, heavy footsteps moved across the floor of Lisa's house, the sound of drawers opening, doors creaking. He was searching for us. I gripped the bat tighter, my fear sharpening into determination. "If he comes down here, we fight," I said quietly. Lisa nodded, her hands curling into fists. "We fight." The basement fell silent except for our ragged breathing and the soft patter of rain outside. We didn't know if help would arrive in time, but at least we weren't alone anymore. For the first time that night, my terror wasn't paralyzing me. It was fueling me. I was done waiting. The air inside the basement felt heavy, thick with dust and fear. Lisa and I crouched behind a stack of storage boxes, the dim yellow light from the small window barely enough to see each other's faces. Every sound above us made my pulse jump, the slow creak of footsteps, the faint closing of a door, the whisper of someone breathing too close. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Then Lisa leaned close and whispered, "He knows we're here." The way she said it, flat, certain, made my stomach twist. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that maybe he was just checking the rest of the house, but deep down I knew she was right. The way those footsteps moved, slow and deliberate, wasn't random. Whoever he was hunting, listening for us. I tightened my grip on the baseball bat, the wood slick with sweat. "The police are coming, right?
I whispered back. She nodded, her breathing uneven. They said 10 minutes, but it's been longer. The silence stretched again, and then came a sound that made my blood run cold, the soft creak of the basement door opening. Lisa's eyes widened. She covered her mouth to stop from gasping. The faint beam of a flashlight swept across the top of the basement stairs, moving side to side. Then came the slow, steady steps of boots descending one at a time. Each creak of the wooden stairs felt like a countdown. I could see the beam of light cutting through the dark, scanning the walls, the floor, the shelves. He was coming closer. Lisa squeezed my arm and whispered, "Stay down." But I couldn't. Every instinct inside me screamed to do something before he reached the bottom. I crawled forward, keeping behind the boxes, and positioned myself where I could see the staircase. The man's silhouette finally appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hooded jacket. The flashlight beam landed on a metal shelf, reflecting briefly onto his face. What I saw made my breath catch. He wasn't a stranger. I recognized him. He was Tom Harper, Lisa's husband, the security guard she always mentioned working night shifts, the same man who'd once helped me carry groceries from my car. For a moment, my mind couldn't accept it. It didn't make sense. He was supposed to be at work, but then I saw his expression, cold, unrecognizable, and the knife glinting in his gloved hand. Lisa's hand covered her mouth as she realized it too. Her voice cracked in a whisper. "Oh my God." Tom's voice was calm, almost casual. "Lisa, come out. You're making this harder than it needs to be." He moved down another step, the flashlight jerking slightly in his hand. "You shouldn't have called anyone. You should have just stayed quiet." I looked at Lisa. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she wasn't frozen anymore. She mouthed one word. "Run." I shook my head. If we ran, he'd hear us before we made it to the window. There was no time. Tom reached the bottom of the stairs and took another slow step toward the boxes. The beam of his flashlight was getting closer. I could see the sweat on his neck, the calm focus in his eyes. I stood up suddenly, swinging the bat with every ounce of strength I had. The crack of wood hitting metal echoed through the basement as the bat struck his wrist. The flashlight flew out of his hand, clattering across the floor. He shouted in pain and dropped the knife. "Go!" I yelled. Lisa scrambled toward the basement door while I swung again, this time catching his shoulder. He lunged forward, knocking me backward, and we both hit the concrete hard. The air rushed out of my lungs, but I didn't let go of the bat. He grabbed my arm, trying to pin me down, his face twisted with fury. "You should have stayed out of this, Rachel." I kicked him in the knee and rolled away just as Lisa reached the top of the stairs and threw the light switch. The old ceiling bulb flickered to life, flooding the basement in harsh yellow light. Tom blinked, momentarily disoriented. That second was enough. I swung again, hitting his side. He stumbled backward, slamming into the shelves. Boxes crashed down around him, scattering tools and old glass jars. The sound of sirens pierced through the air outside, close, loud, growing stronger by the second. Lisa screamed, "The police are here!" Tom looked toward the window, panic flashing across his face. He turned to run up the stairs, but before he could reach the top, a voice shouted from outside, "Police, drop your weapon and get on the ground!" The front door above us burst open, boots thundered through the hallway, and seconds later 2 officers rushed down the basement stairs with flashlights drawn. "Hands where we can see them," one officer commanded. Tom froze, his shoulders tense. For a moment, I thought he might try something, but then he dropped to his knees, breathing hard, his face expressionless. The officers cuffed him and pulled him upright. Lisa was crying, shaking uncontrollably as another officer helped her sit down on the steps. I stood there gasping for breath, the bat still in my hands. One of the officers turned to me. "You okay, ma'am?" I nodded slowly, though nothing about me felt okay. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely speak. "That's her husband," I managed to say. The officer gave me a grim look. "We know. We've had reports from other homes nearby. You two got lucky." They led Tom up the stairs, his expression unreadable. As they passed, he looked at Lisa one last time. She turned her face away, tears streaming down her cheeks. When the basement was finally quiet again, Lisa sank to the floor and whispered, "I thought I knew him. I never thought he could do this." I knelt beside her, wrapping my arms around her shoulders. "You saved me," I said softly. "Your call saved both of us." We stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other as the blue and red lights flashed through the basement window. The nightmare was over, but the world we knew before that night was gone. The next morning, the neighborhood didn't feel like the same place anymore. The cheerful houses with trimmed lawns and hanging flower baskets looked strange in the early light, as if they were pretending everything was normal. But nothing was normal. The flashing red and blue lights that had filled our quiet street only a few hours earlier were gone now, replaced by the hum of quiet disbelief. Police tape fluttered across Lisa's porch. A single patrol car remained parked by the curb. The smell of wet earth and rain still lingered in the air, heavy and cold. I stood on Lisa's driveway, watching as officers carried out boxes of evidence from her basement. Lisa sat nearby on a blanket with a paramedic wrapped in a gray shawl. She looked pale and exhausted, her hands trembling as she tried to hold a cup of tea. When she noticed me, she managed a weak smile. I walked over slowly, my legs still shaky from the adrenaline that hadn't fully left my body. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey," she replied, her voice quiet. "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. "I will be." "What about you?" She hesitated before answering. "I keep thinking maybe if I'd said something sooner, maybe if I'd noticed the signs." Her voice trailed off. She looked toward her house, eyes filling with tears. "He wasn't the man I thought he was, Rachel. All those years, and I never really saw him." I didn't know what to say. I sat beside her, and we just stayed there for a while, listening to the distant murmur of the police radio. The morning sun broke through the gray clouds, lighting up the wet grass and turning every raindrop into a tiny spark of light. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. When the officers finally finished, one of them came over and handed Lisa a small bag containing her phone and a few personal items. He spoke to her gently, explaining that Tom had been connected to a string of break-ins and assaults stretching across several towns. She listened in silence, staring down at her hands. When the officer left, she whispered, "I think he was planning to hurt me that night. When he realized I was calling for help, he just changed." I put a hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing. You called me. You called the police. You saved both of us." She gave a small, sad laugh. "I didn't save you. You saved me." The truth was, we had saved each other. If she hadn't called, I never would have known to be afraid. If I hadn't gone to her house, he might have found her before help arrived. Somehow, in the middle of that nightmare, we'd both found a strength neither of us knew we had. That evening, after everything had settled and the police cars were gone, I went back to my own house. Every room felt different. The silence wasn't comforting anymore. It felt like a reminder of how fragile safety really is. I checked every door twice, every window latch, every lock. When I finally sat down, the weight of it all hit me. The fear, the confusion, the realization that someone I trusted had been capable of so much cruelty. I thought about all the times Lisa had spoken about her husband with pride, how he worked long nights to keep the town safe, how dependable he was. It made me think about how easily people can hide behind masks of normalcy, how often danger looks ordinary until it isn't. Over the next few weeks, things began to calm down. The story made the local news for a few days, but life moved on quickly for everyone else. For us, it lingered. Lisa sold her house and moved to stay with her son in Portland. Before she left, she came to my door one last time. "I'm not running away," she said, holding a small box of cookies like she always used to bring. I just need a new start, somewhere I can breathe again." I hugged her tightly. "You deserve that." When she drove off that afternoon, I stood on my porch for a long time, watching her car disappear around the corner. The street was quiet again, but it would never feel like the same quiet it once was. In the weeks that followed, I installed a security system, motion lights, and cameras, but the biggest change wasn't outside, it was in me. I learned to listen to my instincts, to take every uneasy feeling seriously. I used to roll my eyes when people double-checked their locks or peeked through curtains before opening the door. Now I understood, fear isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's your body trying to keep you alive. Whenever I drive home late from work now, I pass Lisa's old house. The porch light is off and new people live there. Sometimes I still glance at the window where I first saw that shadow standing in the rain, and my stomach tightens. But then I remind myself that I made it through, that we both did. That night taught me that real danger doesn't always announce itself with screaming or chaos. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's a voice on the phone telling you not to look out your window. And sometimes the hardest thing to do, the thing that can save your life, is to listen. Now, every time I lock my door, I think of Lisa's voice, soft and desperate, echoing in my mind. "Don't look out your window." I didn't listen that night, and I almost paid the price. But I survived, and that survival gave me a strength I didn't know I had. Because the truth is, the scariest part of that night wasn't the man outside. It was realizing how easily ordinary life can turn into a nightmare when you stop paying attention. If this story gave you chills or made you think twice about your own safety, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because sometimes the best way to stay safe is by sharing the stories that remind us why we should always trust our instincts.